Welcome back to the 79th online episode of Peacetime, hosted every Sunday morning by Peacetime with myself, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, coming to you today from DIMC in Azusa, California. Last time you saw me, we looked at blessing number 37 on freedom from subtle defilements. With the Dhamma talk today, we arrive at the final blessing, number 38, on the blissful mind. So today's session will run to about an hour and 10 minutes, starting with a 20-minute talk on the different sorts of happiness and the dangers standing in their way. Then 40 minutes of meditation and 20 minutes on how to be happier on spiritual and worldly levels, and finishing up with questions sent in by viewers. Since ancient times, many notable philosophers and scholars grappled with the question of the features that distinguish humans from animals. So, right from King Solomon, through Plato, to the molecular biologists, neurobiologists, and neuropsychologists of the present day. For a long while, it was assumed that it was intelligence that set us apart. But we now realize that whales, dolphins, crows, parrots, and apes also possess high levels of intelligence. Next, we wondered if it were our self-awareness that makes us unique. Apes also show various degrees of self-awareness. Even our communication skills, although highly developed, are not unique, since whales, dolphins, birds, and apes all communicate using quite complex languages. Some have suggested that our capacity to feel and show empathy is uniquely human. However, a mother elephant will grieve over a dead calf, and the whole herd has been observed to commiserate with her. To ward off predators, even buffalo form a protective shield around a female giving birth. In short, we have become increasingly aware that all the supposedly human traits are millions of years old. Nonetheless, there are some characteristics of humans that are still truly unique and different from lower animals. Daniel Gilbert points out in his 2007 bestseller, Stumbling on Happiness, that the human being seems to be the only animal that thinks about the long-term future. Although a dog might plan for the near future, knowing when to wait by its food bowl or getting ready for an afternoon walk. But even if global warming is an existential threat to the silverback gorilla in the impenetrable forests of Uganda, they don't seem to have the capacity to get worried about it. Unlike humans, you don't get animals dying of boredom. So it seems that humans are the only species that has an awareness of the future and our place in the world. Humans also seem to be the only species concerned about extinction in the distant future. Other animals seem to be satisfied if they have fulfilled their urges of food, sleep, reproduction, and avoiding immediate death. But for human beings, even when these things have been fulfilled, they still crave for more, or they may get bored with it, as if a quest for meaning in life runs deeper than merely living in interesting times. Humans seem to crave for meaning or purpose beyond their immediate selves. Of course, there are many disastrous examples of people looking for happiness in the wrong places or by antisocial means, with expansionism, insatiable craving for power, money, or security being among the more externally focused obsessions people express. People fight for their obsessions because deep down they believe these things lie at the root of their happiness. Sometimes misplaced happiness can be a national phenomenon, but on a smaller scale, even brothers and sisters be at each other's throats over a family will. Most people confuse security with happiness, perhaps the happiness of guaranteeing the standard of living they have become accustomed to, of keeping up with the fashions, and being spoiled for choice. Take away any of these creature comforts, and besides trampling on a person's sense of security, by all the conventional definitions, you seem to be robbing them of their happiness. But even given rights, property, and a steady income, even with the best welfare system in the world, after 50 years, none of the security can stave off the torment of old age, sickness, and death. So you can see that the human is a curious creature. But even with material security, it is still impossible to be completely content with life. If material security were the basis of a happy life, then certainly millionaires would be the happiest people on earth. And the bottom line is that even those living in the top-ranking countries from the World Happiness Report still complain about that high tax rate they have to pay to finance it all. Myers and Diener reported in Scientific American that although Americans earned twice as much in the year 2000 as they did in the 1980s, the proportion reporting themselves to be very happy climbed from 35% to 29% over that space of time. There's nothing to indicate that the rich are much happier than those of average income. Another much-cited 2018 paper, published in Nature by Jeb, A. Diener, and Oishi, posed the principle of income satiation, whereby if income increases beyond $75,000 per annum, well-being no longer increases. Furthermore, the word happiness has become so severely devalued these days that although everybody is secretly looking for it, few people would openly admit it. And for most people, it is no more tangible than a mirage in the desert that tantalizes the thirst of a dying man. The common confusion surrounding happiness caused the Buddha to distinguish between two different sorts of happiness. The first sort of happiness described by the Buddha, which he called Samisa Sukha, is the happiness derived from being secure in material wealth. Capitalist society perpetuates the myth that the more you own, happier you will be. In reality, however, maintaining wealth can lead to anxiety, and if you happen to lose it, the anxiety will turn to pain. This is why the Buddha taught us to regard our possessions as only being on loan in our lives. The second and superior sort of happiness, which he described as Niramisa Sukha, is happiness that comes from inside us and which does not depend on wealth. This sort of happiness can be attained by practicing virtues like generosity, the precepts, or meditation. It's not a happiness that distracts us from our suffering, the happiness of overcoming our suffering. It is an expansive, enduring, and transformative happiness which we would want to share with others and which will eventually pave the way towards nirvana. A familiar example of such happiness might be when giving away something such as a gift exceeds the happiness of keeping it. Paired with this latter sort of happiness, what commonly goes by the name of happiness hardly even deserves to be called the same name. What most people call happiness is only a temporary distraction from the emptiness that seems to be the default setting in their lives. However, when a person starts to practice meditation, it gives the mind a new internal point of balance. Where before the mind was never satisfied without a very good reason, the mind will become bright and happy with a self-contained sense of contentment, something that's no longer momentary, but which can be sustained for long periods of time. It's a happiness that makes us see others as our friends instead of as our competitors, friends with whom we would like to share our happiness. The more content we are with our state of mind, the stiller the mind becomes. And the stiller the mind becomes, the more happiness arises. As you meditate more deeply, you'll find that the happiness is not really yours or a part of you, but you are a part of that happiness. To be honest, everyone has true happiness inside them somewhere, like an underground reservoir. Unless you dig deep by meditating, the happiness is trapped so far inside that it is inaccessible. This is why, in the context of Buddhism, the idea of true happiness and secure refuge seem to belong together. This internally sourced category of true happiness corresponds with the bliss referred to in the title of this final blessing. It's a sense of relief in the mind which arises when one has, through the acquisition of wisdom and internal light, liberated oneself from all the dangers and fetters mentioned in the previous blessings. So the quality of mind described by the Pali word hemang, from which this blessing takes its name, is translated as blissful because such happiness offers invulnerability to danger. The mind has become free, no longer under the control of insidious influences. No further threats can interfere with the mind by virtue of having one's mind permanently immersed in the eternal bliss of nirvana. The word kemang can, however, also be translated as a secure refuge, in which case it is referring to endowment with knowledge, as a quality of mind where no further form of delusion can obscure its inherent wisdom. As we shall see later, penetrative wisdom coming as a result of enlightenment can be summarized as several sets of special mind qualities. We often hear the ironic aphorism, ignorance is bliss, or what you don't know can't harm you. When we try to understand this final blessing, neither saying would seem to ring true. Since happiness is not synonymous with physical security, it would seem that happiness is more closely linked with the knowledge needed to remove the unknown from one's spiritual destiny. Besides being the final blessing of the series, the subject matter of this blessing is considered the ultimate goal of the entire 38 blessings, like a destination reached safely by a traveler or a far shore reached safely by a mariner. It is a relief because throughout our journey we have been threatened by dangers waiting to jeopardize our journey. In the darkness of ignorance, we might not have appreciated how many potential dangers surrounded us. But even in our unknowing, there was fear. But as we kindled that inner brightness little by little through our meditation, the darkness of unknowing was gradually dispelled. No longer mysterious, the dangers that lurked in the darkness were gradually vanquished along with the darkness, until we could reach a safe destination. The darkness in the mind that we are dealing with, which the Buddha would say has been with us for innumerable lifetimes, is the darkness that holds us back from answers to the eternal questions such as, why were we born? Where have we come from? Or what is the meaning of life? Or when we die, where do we go? Without answers to the fundamental questions that give meaning to life, the assumptions on which we base our life were formerly no more than guesswork. If we were lucky, our guesswork paid off. If we were less lucky, the errors we made only served to deepen the shadows. So the true happiness we're talking about in this blessing is a direct result of having achieved a refuge from all the potential dangers in the mind. We can divide the dangers from that inner darkness into two main categories that are equivalent to the categories of suffering we encountered in Blessing 33. Firstly, we have built-in danger, which means that everyone without exception coexists with dangers since the day they are born. Dangers which everyone is destined to encounter sooner or later in their lives, and even our fear of them can hamper our efforts to cultivate good deeds in our lives. These dangers correspond to the danger of birth or jati-bhaya, the danger of old age or chara-bhaya, the danger of illness or payati-bhaya, and the danger of death or marana-bhaya. Next come the mitigable dangers. Apart from the inbuilt dangers, we still have to endure the external dangers encountered in our everyday lives. The dangers might come in the form of people such as fools, false friends, abusive husbands, manipulative wives, or bad neighbors. The dangers might come from natural disasters such as flooding, earthquakes, volcanoes, or wildfires, or they may come from the outcomes of unwholesome karma we have stored up for ourselves from the past. The good news for the second category of dangers is that forewarned is forearmed. These dangers are sometimes summarized as 4 sorts of shackles or yoga, which keep us prisoner in the 3 realms of existence. The shackles are not physical, but act by limiting our access to wisdom in the mind. There are 4 different sorts of shackles. Firstly, there is the shackle of sensual indulgence or Kama yoga. As long as we are still partial to hearing seductive music, tasting delicious food, wearing well-cut clothes, ogling beautiful photos, touching plush upholstery, this shackle will tightly bind us, ensuring that we never stray from the sensual sphere in our future lives. Secondly, there's the shackle of attachment to the absorptions, or power yoga. This shackle may occur when we become attached to our mental attainments at the level of the form and formless absorptions. As soon as a person breaks free of the shackle of sensual indulgence, they will usually be ensnared by this one instead. If one dies while still caught in this shackle, instead of being able to go to nirvana at death, one would be reborn in the Brahma worlds. Thirdly, there is the shackle of views, or ditthi yoga. This is being entrenched in one's own erroneous views, such as believing that one has no debt of gratitude to one's parents, believing in the non-reality of this world and the next, or believing one can escape suffering just by performing rites and rituals. Such views only add to the darkness in the mind, obscuring reality. Lastly, there's a shackle of ignorance, or avijja yoga. This is imprisonment in one's own delusion that prevents one from realizing the Dhamma, or the truth necessary for attaining enlightenment. One's ignorance is the result of a deficit on internal illumination, not being able to discern the path to self-liberation. So ignorance is counted as the fourth of the shackles. Whenever a prisoner is released from detention and regains freedom, the relief is not just emotional but also physical. In the same way, those who attain nirvana, who have escaped the touch of all defilements and fetters, will also have a mind suffused with bliss. So happiness is not so much about changing the circumstances as transcending them. There's an account in the Sakamāna Sutta of the Samyutta Nikaya that describes a scene where the Buddha was sitting in a forest glade during the midday rest period. The large gathering of forest animals and the sound of all their cries was a fearful racket. One angel objected to the horrendous sound, finding it got on their nerves, saying, "When the noon hour sets in and the birds have settled down, the mighty forest itself murmurs. How fearful that appears to me." However, hearing the same sound, the response of the Buddha was completely different. He declared, "Even when all the forest animals gather together at lunchtime and make such a noise, I am still happy because, after my arms round and having eaten, it is my time of meditation." So it would appear that what constitutes true happiness makes such a difference to a person that even perceiving the same things as the next, one's understanding of reality has been transformed to make one respond to it in the most positive manner appropriate. So now that we are a little more well-informed by the nature of inner happiness, let's see if we can free the mind from its shackles by settling ourselves down for 40 minutes of meditation, which today is a recent live recording of the track entitled "The Diamond Brightness of Eternal Youth." If at this time you would like to find a comfortable sitting position for yourself as you listen to my guidance. So if you'd like to start by closing your eyes very gently, adjusting your posture so that your back is very straight, so that you're breathing easily and your circulation is unimpeded. Rest your hands gently in your lap, with the right hand over the left hand and the index finger of your right hand touching against the thumb of your left hand. If you're sitting on a meditation mat, then you'll be sitting in a half lotus position. If you're sitting on a chair, then it's best to be on a straight-backed chair. As long as you're not going to fall asleep halfway through, then the meditation should go successfully for you. And we follow our breath deep down inside the body, while scanning down through the whole of ourselves, relaxing each and every muscle as we go. So starting with the muscles of our forehead, we relax any tension there. We make sure our eyes are only very gently closed, rather than closing our eyes tightly. We let the muscles of our face become soft. We relax our jaw, being particularly careful not to clench our teeth together. From there we relax our neck and shoulders, letting our shoulders drop to their natural height. Relaxing our arms, forearms, our hands and fingers, so that the way our hands rest in our lap is as light and gentle as possible. Then continuing on down, we relax the whole of our torso, whether it be our chest, trunk, or our abdomen. And then relaxing both legs, all the way down to our feet and our toes, until we feel satisfied that no part of our body remains with any sort of stress or tension anymore. If there are places where tension still seems to linger on, then we do our best to relax that tension as far as possible, allowing ourselves to turn our attention inward, to relax our state of mind in just the same way. But the way we relax our mind is to put aside temporarily any worries or concerns pertaining to our life. Almost as if we were sitting alone in the world, like a person with no past and no future, but entirely focused in the present moment and on the task in hand. So we conjure up a sense of well-being within ourselves, as if well-being were made up of tiny particles of happiness and joy, that seem to grow and spread inside us, to fill the whole of our body and mind. Leaving no space inside ourselves for any other sort of thought. And when we feel relaxed and refreshed, both in body and in mind, very gently and using no effort at all, we can imagine the whole of our body to be nothing but a hollow cavity or an empty shell. Alternately, you might prefer to think of your body as being like a transparent bubble with nothing on the inside. And within this empty space of our body, somewhere around the level of our diaphragm, is a place where the in-breath will go to the deepest point inside, before turning around to come back out as the out-breath. It's exactly the same point that we are particularly interested in as a focus for the mind, this turning point for the breath, where the breath pauses just for a moment between the in-breath and the out-breath. You can also think of this place as being like a source of peace from within. And the more we allow our awareness to familiarize itself with this point, the more the mind will start to pick up on that sense of peace and tranquility from within. All we need to do to build up that familiarity with the center of the body is to gently maintain an inner image or an inner feeling that we have conjured up at that point. Maybe a picture such as that of the shining sun I mentioned earlier, or anything bright and clear, a diamond, a star, a full moon, whatever comes easiest to us. And maintaining this inner object in this way, the mind will gradually find its equilibrium as it rests gently at the center of the body. The point inside ourselves has some special qualities. It seems to be the source of peace from within ourselves. Sometimes it even feels like the source of all that is alive inside us. And certainly it has the quality of always being bright. And our subjective feeling, our sense of interoception, can pick up on that brightness as we train the mind. But the way we can approach that ability to pick up on the inner brightness is by concentrating more on the inner feeling, on what we feel rather than asking questions why. And allowing that brightness to grow and spread within us, with the mind centered softly in the process of our meditation. Every time the mind is at the center of the body, it's like reconnecting with that inner spark of life. The task of our meditation is to maintain our attention gently inside the body, allowing the mind to return to where it needs to be, to re-engage with its natural and pure state. If we get the balance just right, if we hit upon the sweet spot in our meditation, then we'll have a sense of expansion outwards from that central point. And we allow the volume of brightness to expand and enlarge outwards towards an endless horizon in all directions all around. Enlarging without limits, radiating forever outwards, amid the feeling of contentment. And although the point at the center of ourselves may remain always the brightest place, but the brightness radiates outwards without limits. It's almost like a diamond-like point of brightness at the center of a general illumination within us. Diamond-like sparkling in the center, full moon brightness on the periphery.
allow the brightness to envelop us, while touching our attention gently at the most precious, diamond-like brightness at the center of ourselves. Sometimes in the context of Tibetan tradition we may have heard the chanting Om Mani Padme Hum, the diamond brightness at the center of the lotus. And with our meditation also, it's as if the very center of ourselves is a diamond-like point from which the lotus can gradually blossom outwards. We allow our mind to rest gently at the center of the body, while remaining connected with the brightness all around. Immersing ourselves in this inner feeling, sense of serenity, youthfulness. And although in the back of our mind we may be aware that our physical body has to deteriorate over time, but there's a sense of the mind always being forever young, for as long as it's in touch with this inner sparkling brightness. So we engage with that brightness more and more, magnifying, multiplying the inner light of serenity, while reminding ourselves that our time of meditation on each session should be the best time of our day. So we continue to maintain our mind at the center, gently observing the inner bright diamond sparkle at the center of ourselves for a few more moments now in silence until we come to the appropriate time. we find our mind wandering off onto other things, each time we realize, we simply bring our awareness back again to the center of the body as before, bringing it back for as many times as it takes to build up that sense of connectedness between our mind and that special place at the center of ourselves. If we're new to meditation, we need to be quite persistent in bringing the mind back, not being put off if it's 100 times or 1,000 times that we need to bring the mind back into place. But each time we bring the mind back, it'll become a little bit easier to keep it at the center the next time round, until having the mind in place becomes almost second nature to us. In practice, the key to keeping the mind in place is to strike the right balance, using neither too little nor too much force to keep the mind in place. Sometimes we think we need to hold on firmly to the mind to get it to do what we want. But actually we need a slightly more open-handed approach. Something similar to holding a small bird inside our hands. Hold it too tightly and it will smother the bird. Too loosely and it will slip between your fingers. But somewhere in between is a sort of happy medium by which the bird can remain safe within our cradled fingers. And it's finding this sweet spot in our meditation that is really the key to the mind being able to go deeper at the central point. If thoughts return, we do our best to ignore them. If there are too many to ignore, then we can make use of that traditional mantra, hearing the sound of the words Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, Samma Arahang, coming up as if from that central point, with a silent but resonant quality to the sound. We continue in this way lightly and gently for a few more moments in silence until we come to time for our loving-kindness meditation. So we continue to maintain our awareness at the center of the body the whole of the time, lightly, gently, continuously, picking up on that sense of diamond-like brightness and the enveloping moonlight around the periphery. And by placing our mind very gently at the center of that diamond brightness, we can share the brightness further outward still for the benefit of all around us. The way we can share that inner brightness as a loving kindness is initially to allow the brightness to fill the whole of ourselves with the wish that we be well and happy, free from all suffering, with the full force of forgiveness for ourselves. From there we can allow the brightness to spread wider still to those around us, outwards into the environment around us, almost as if we were a sentinel of all that is bright and wholesome on this earth. Because if a single meditator can bring brightness and wholesomeness to our planet, you can imagine how bright and beautiful the world could become if everyone in the world reconnected with that inner light. So we expand our brightness outwards, initially to the whole room in which we're sitting for meditation, and wider to the whole building, to the whole neighborhood, almost like an aura or a halo that we are extending in all directions all around, outwards to the whole town or city, wider on the level of the borough, county, country, eventually to the whole continent and all the continents of the world, until our brightness extends across the entire face of this planet, with a sense of compassion and forgiveness for all, no matter who or what they may be, until the brightness feels infinite, growing and expanding wider, together with its brightness throughout the world, with the wish that everyone on earth can one day reconnect with their inner light, while remaining mindful of the precious nature of this opportunity all of us have taken, giving ourselves to reconnect, giving ourselves the chance to reconnect with that inner brightness for ourselves. We continue to gently maintain the mind at the center, harnessing that inner diamond brightness and spreading it outwards as the full moon brightness, as far as we can for the last few moments of our meditation practice in silence.
สัพพพุทธานุภาเวนะสัพพธัมมานุภาเวนะสัพพสังฆานุภาเวนะสัทธาโสธีภวันตุเต If you'd like to come to the end of your meditation for today, you can gradually open your eyes again. If you feel at all uncomfortable, then slowly try changing into a more comfortable position before gently finishing your practice. So to return gently to our subject matter of the blissful mind for today, it would seem that some people, even without hearing a talk on the 38 blessings, seem to just ooze happiness. They always seem to be able to smile, have fun, and shake off negative emotions. Of course, cheerfulness is not the same as bliss, but scientific research has pointed to some ways we can choose to ameliorate happiness levels in life. And I do say scientifically proven because, of course, every commercial tries to make out that their product is the one thing holding us back from happiness and contentment in life. So some things which we can easily change to boost happiness levels on a certain level in our lives fall into three basic recommendation categories: dietary, exercise, and behavior modification. In terms of diet, there is scientific evidence for the mood-lifting properties of dark leafy greens such as spinach and kale, for their folate content, regular mushrooms, magic mushrooms for their vitamin D content, turmeric for its curcumin content, chocolate for its tryptophan content, healthy varieties of coffee rather than fancy coffee drinks, green tea for its polyphenol content, healthy fats that apparently smooth out your blood sugar levels, salmon, avocados, and nuts for their omega-3 content, St. John's wort for its antidepressive properties, which works for some people. Also recommended if you're going to eat comfort foods like carbs as a mood pick-me-up, it's best to snack in the afternoon. And apparently sniffing citrus scents like orange, lemon, or grapefruit is found uplifting by some people. In terms of exercise, any sort of workout, whether it be running, indoor cycling, yoga, or dancing, as long as you break a sweat, will lead endorphins to be released throughout your body and alleviate the symptoms of depression. You don't need to be too tough on yourself because even a brisk 20 to 30-minute walk will help. Yoga can also help ease depressive symptoms as well as anxiety, allowing you to slow down and focus on your breathing rather than on your worries, frustrations, and problems. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a proven treatment for clinical depression and anxiety disorders, and it can also help anybody who simply needs to learn how to combat negative thoughts. Meditation, of course, is also a proven stress buster with no harmful side effects, and is said to release happy chemicals in the brain such as serotonin, dopamine, and endorphins. Apart from diet and exercise, other modifications to your behavior proven to bring happier feelings about life include taking micro breaks during your workday to watch funny videos online, which seem to have the power to turn around a bad mood in less than a minute. Making the effort to smile more, even if you have to fake it at first, helps activate the happiness centers in your brain, leaving you in a better mood. Some claim that it takes 43 muscles to frown, while smiling uses only 17. Some say that you have to be happy first before you can smile, but scientific evidence shows that even faking a smile sparks off a chemical reaction in the brain that releases certain hormones, including dopamine and serotonin, which increase your feelings of happiness. Some people stay inside in the dark when they're feeling depressed, but increasing the amount of light in your life is often accompanied by more feelings of happiness. This might be achieved merely by opening the shades if you're inside, spending more time outside, or if you're in the middle of the endless darkness of the winter months, light therapy can effectively treat seasonal affective disorder by sitting in front of a light box for 30 to 60 minutes as part of a daily routine. Harvard researchers found that buying yourself flowers or keeping fresh flowers around your home does wonders in keeping away anxiety and negative thoughts. If loneliness is something linked to your lack of happiness, having a pet to play with, or finding opportunities for human connection releases those feel-good chemicals like serotonin, as well as reducing blood pressure and heart rate, allowing you to feel more relaxed. Lastly, although it might not be appropriate in the temple, but at home, listening to a favorite song and singing along to it. Apparently, the sense of nostalgia releases the feel-good chemical of dopamine in your system. But going deeper than superficial happiness, true happiness should be about more than merely feeling secure in yourself and in your identity. In this connection, there are different sorts of mental attainments an enlightened person accumulates as a tool by which they can uncover the mysteries of the world and gain the ability to impart this knowledge to others. For arahants who become enlightened, these abilities are developed to a greater or lesser extent, allowing the invisible to become visible to the mind. All arahants develop the basic minimum of knowledge of an utter end to defilements, but others, like the Buddha, develop the threefold supranormal knowledge, the sixfold superpowers, or the eightfold knowledge. As the threefold and sixfold sets are subsets of the eightfold supernormal knowledge, I'm just going to detail on the 8 supernormal knowledges. In addition, some arahants attain what is known as the fourfold analytical insights, which are useful for imparting knowledge to others. So, the eightfold supernormal knowledge, or vichā, is a way of describing the byproducts of the wisdom of the enlightened one. It consists of insight knowledge, or vipassana jnana, mental powers, or manomayiti, supernormal powers, or itiviti, which, to clarify, means the ability to perform certain miracles to change the nature of objects, such as floating in the air, transmuting the body, enlarging or shrinking oneself, or making oneself invisible. Then we come to supernormal audition, or dipasota, which means being able to hear sounds not audible to others. Reading the minds of others, or jetopariyayana, the ability to recollect one's own previous existences, or pupe nivasa nusatiyana, the ability to recollect the previous existences of others, known as dipachakku or jatupapadayana, and finally the knowledge of an utter end to all defilements, or asavakaya jnana. For the eightfold supernormal knowledge, the first 7 are worldly or lokiya accomplishments, the 8th alone being the transcendental or lokuttara. This means that the knowledge of reaching an end to all defilements can be achieved by authentic attainment and is impossible to fake at lower levels of attainment. As for the other abilities, sometimes they are found in those who have a lesser attainment. As for the fourfold analytical insights, or patisampita, these are mental abilities concerned with the teaching of the Dharma to others. They are attained by those who have reached an end to defilements and comprise, firstly, analytical insight into consequences, or atta patisampita, which means mastery of the ability to enlarge upon any subject of the Dharma in detail. Then, analytic insight into causes, or Dhamma patisampita, which means mastery of the ability to summarize any subject of the Dharma without losing the core meaning. Then, analytic insight into language, or nirutti patisampita, which means mastery of all forms of human and animal communication. And finally, analytical insight into wit, or patipana patisampita, which is mastery of the ability to think on one's feet and answer Dhamma questions on the spot. All these sets of supernormal knowledge are fruits which may accrue to a greater or lesser extent to those reaching the upper echelons of enlightenment. In conclusion, there are many teachings in Buddhism that are just descriptive or philosophical, which are merely good to know but may not of themselves reduce suffering in your life. The 38 blessings, though, can be regarded as a, if not the, definitive core set of pragmatic teachings in Buddhism. We should therefore try to put all 38 into practice, Because if we practice in earnest, before long we will be able to avail ourselves of the true knowledge and happiness at the core of Buddhism, and have a knowledge of the supernormal in the footsteps of the Buddha and all the Arahants. If we practice more and more, we will start to have more answers than questions on the existential aspects of life. We begin to know for ourselves our purpose in life, and as we follow the examples set by the Buddha in practicing virtues, throughout the series of 38 blessings, we will be able to embellish our practice with more nuanced aspects of the Buddha's teaching. The Buddha once gave a teaching in the Simsapa forest called the Simsapa Sutta, where he picked up a handful of leaves and asked the monks which was the greater amount of leaves, those in his hand or those on all the trees in the forest. The monks replied that the number of leaves in the forest was greater. The Buddha concluded that even so, the teachings he had made manifest, in other words, the pragmatic practices of the 38 blessings, were equivalent only to the leaves in his hand. But what he had not taught, also Dhamma, but not directly relevant to the release from suffering, were as numerous as all the leaves on the trees in the forest. Consequently, even having come to an end of the 38 blessings, there is much more to learn. You might consider those extra teachings could be considered superfluous to the task of overcoming suffering, but they may be useful if you want to know more than the core teachings of the 38 blessings, and I would encourage you to keep studying now that you have the 38 blessings as your point of reference. So finish off today with a quick Dhamma story relevant to the connection between enlightenment and happiness. Once during the time of the Buddha, a king called Mahā-Kappina, with his queen Anucha, reigned in the frontier kingdom of Kukutawati. King Mahā-Kappina was very motivated to meet up with the Buddha and learn his teachings. Consequently, every morning Mahā-Kappina would send out messengers from the 4 gates of his city to seek news from passing traders as to the arising of an enlightened one in the world. One day after the Buddha had arisen in the world, a group of traders from Savatthi were visiting Kukutawati. They informed King Mahā-Kappina of the arising of the Buddha. Just hearing the word Buddha, King Mahā-Kappina was deeply moved to the point that he fainted on the spot. When he came round, to be sure he had heard correctly, he asked again, and the traders mentioned the word Buddha a total of 3 times, the king falling into a faint every time he heard the word. And the same thing happened when the traders mentioned the arising of the Dharma and of the Sangha. So in the end, he fainted a total of 9 times. Without further hesitation, the king ran out of the throne, and after rewarding the merchants handsomely, left the palace in search of the Buddha, accompanied by all his courtiers. The group set off in the direction of Savatthi, but blocking their path were 3 deep rivers, which they must cross on horseback: the Aravacha, the Nilawahana, and the Chantapaka. Each time they reached the bank of one of these rivers, Mahā-Kappina would make an act of truth, declaring, "If the teacher whom we seek is truly a fully enlightened Buddha, let not even the hooves of our horses be wetted by the crossing of the river." Miraculously, each river became temporarily solid like ice, allowing Mahā-Kappina and his courtiers to cross to the other side. In this manner, they crossed the 3 rivers. In his meditation, the Buddha perceived Mahā-Kappina's approach and traveled through the air to the banks of the Chantapaka river, where he seated himself under a banyan tree, facing the direction of their approach, and sent forth radiance as a signal to Mahā-Kappina. When Mahā-Kappina and his courtiers met up with the Buddha and had paid respect, the Buddha taught them until they became arahants, joining the order of the monks. Meanwhile, Anucha and her courtiers renounced the world in a similar way, and crossed all 3 rivers, as their husbands had done, to meet the Buddha. The Buddha made the women's husbands temporarily invisible to them, so there would be no distraction as he preached the Dharma, and the women too could become stream enterers, entering the order under Upalawana Kuni. Mahā-Kappina spent his days in ecstasy of deep meditation, and was so full of happiness that he constantly repeated the words, "Oh the happiness, in Pali, Aho Sukhang, which led the other monks to the mistaken conclusion that he was pining for the pleasures of kingship that he had left behind, until the Buddha dispelled their doubts, explaining that the happiness of attaining arahantship is beyond compare, happiness beyond what anyone can keep to themselves. So today we have a question sent in by one of our viewers, Nancy Jane Richardson of Lincoln in the UK. So here comes the question. The phenomenon of precognition features prominently in science fiction, and I was wondering if it is also mentioned in the Pali Canon. Philip K. Dick and possibly others have reportedly seen premonitions of their own deaths. Philip K. Dick wrote a letter recalling how in a hypnagogic state he saw underwater cities and then a scene showing a man lying face down between a coffee table and a sofa. About 7 years later, this actually happened to him, and he was found in his apartment lying between the coffee table and the sofa due to a stroke. And in spite of being taken to hospital, he died shortly afterwards from another stroke. Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse also reportedly had precognition experiences in their lives, where they saw the outcomes of many battles. Philip K. Dick even saved his own son's life by what he called a pink beam insight, alerting doctors even though his son showed no outward symptoms, realizing somehow that his son needed life-saving treatment for an undiscovered malady. The defect, which the doctors had completely missed, was later confirmed with the diagnosis of a congenital hernia. So what I'd like to ask is whether Philip K. Dick and Sitting Bull had some special karma of clairvoyance that allowed them to see the future accurately. Secondly, if what they saw was going to happen before it happened, does it mean that it was fated to happen? Thirdly, Philip K. Dick often described the phenomenon as recalling the future, and claimed his pink beam experience allowed him to remember back for 2,000 years. I remember time is understood as cyclical in Buddhism, but is this sufficient to explain why precognition would be possible? Could it be the case that the geometric fabric of the human realm, and maybe all the realms, repeats itself every 2,000 years? Hi Nancy, and thank you for your question. The people you mentioned, the ability to have clairvoyance may have been carried over from previous life meditation efforts, giving them the access to those intermittent precognitions. The short answer to your question is that people of high merit tend to know in advance when they're going to die, and the Buddha was one of these. The Buddha knew 3 months in advance that he would die, but was unable to change this owing to the lack of an invitation from the Venerable Ananda. Also, the great abbot of Wapaknam knew of his death 5 years in advance, and had the opportunity to set up a succession plan as a result. What the Buddha or enlightened ones saw by what is known as the divine eye or Dipacakku is how karma will give its results in the future. Precognition is recognized in Buddhism because it's included in the 3 jhanas of knowing past, present, and future from the Digha Nikaya's Dasuttara Sutta, and future phenomena or Anagata Dhamma are also acknowledged as a thing in the Abhidhamma funeral chanting. I think the message to take away is that although the future can be seen, sometimes with that knowledge comes the realization that it is possible to amend what people have coming, which is usually karmic retribution that can be averted, but sometimes this is not possible. A person with future knowledge would also know the options available. It is unrelated to the 2,000-year cycle you mentioned because although the world may come into being and then deteriorate, the line of karma and its outcomes for individuals just keeps going forwards. So this session I've introduced to you Blessing 38 on the Blissful Mind. So for my next live session online, which will fingers crossed be a week on Sunday morning, we'll move on to a new set of topics, possibly the suttas in my illuminated text course. For good measure, I'd like to remind viewers that you can email your questions about meditation or what you've heard in the lecture to the email address that you can see spelled out in the slide. I'll do my best to answer these on my next session. In the meantime, try to avoid recklessness or complacency as we continue to deal with the knock-on health and economic effects of the pandemic. Maintain a positive mood, speak only positive words, forgive others, extend good wishes to others, and meditate daily. Hopefully, as a result of today's session, you will feel more inspired to channel the authentic happiness in the mind. So for today, this is me, Phra Nicholas Thanissaro, signing off for now. So long, folks, and stay safe.